It's Cymru, so that's a Welsh word for your anybody who doesn't know Welsh, which I really don't. If you're familiar with my name, Sean, S-E-A-N, as you see it, it's a Welsh name. Cymru is actually a Welsh word meaning Welsh. So if you didn't know that, there you go. All right. So it was interesting. I had a few of the panelists here who have a cybersecurity background, so I will try not to slander the market too much, but okay. All right, so we're looking at, building some resilient organizations. So as we know, and you've heard from different capabilities and everything that people were talking about this weekend, were really about being innovative. A lot of the up-and-coming technologies and things. What you have to think about with cyber is that it has to be ubiquitous. As we continue to grow and have more and more capabilities and technologies that are united, if you will, via the interweb and the internet, you're going to have some level of security to protect your intellectual property, and God forbid it crosses into the boundaries of personal identifiable information that gets out there. There's enough of that out there as it is. So, yes, thank you. Let's see. So cyber threat intelligence, and the space that I'm in with my company, and this is not my company, I'm actually a global public sector director for sales and everything else. So I work with global governments across the world and trying to be trusted advisors on how they continue to address the threats out there that are continuous. So as the threats are evolving, as I mentioned, as we continue to grow technology, and from a government space, we're looking at a national security level for all of their citizens that they're protecting, all of you, from whatever country you live in, and actually if you decide to travel to other countries, to have you have the ability to address these threats that are ongoing. So threat intelligence is the next level. So to have the ability to see beyond the boundaries of all the software and tools that your company's paying for now, your firewalls and your intrusion detection systems and all of those things that have been around for a while, they are and have been evaded for several years now. The threat community, as you will, and you'll hear about it and how almost normal it is, their businesses, have learned how to beat those things. So cyber threat intelligence gives you that next level, the views outside of your environment. So for everybody who's not technical or in cyber at all, so here are some of the names, their motivations of who they are, the actors, the criminals themselves. Nation states, you probably hear that on the news all the time, or APT, Advanced Persistent Threat Groups. These organized companies almost, if you will. In some cases, they're basically built as companies who are out there. The terrorist groups, they're out there for ideological things. You've heard some campaigns where they'll go and they'll take down newspapers or they'll hijack people's websites. They're all out there. So you've got your thrill seekers, who are a smaller group, but they're out there. That used to be a bigger group. That's a smaller group. They would classify a lot of them as some guy in his mother's basement and doing things like that. That's not really a big group, but they're still out there. So insider threats. For those of you who are business owners, you fear that one, because that could be somebody who's disgruntled in your company, who might be passing out trade secrets and other things. So there's that as well. And of course, there's the random hacker. So a typical type of operations that are out there. This is up there, so pretty much everyone knows that you're not, it doesn't matter what size your company is, what industry you're in, you're a target. If you have a name, a serial number, social security number, whatever, you are a target. You will, if you haven't, and I do this often when I speak, how many of you have received a letter from your bank, from Home Depot, from DMV, that maybe your information has been as part of an attack? All right? Yeah. almost everybody should have received, or multiples, like I have. So your information is out there. I mean, you should have some general things that you do with your own personal hygiene, but if you belong to things, you're a citizen, you drive a car, you have insurance, your information's out there. So that's those. So this is to show they're targeting everything that we do. Attribution. So ultimately, attribution is really understanding, and I mentioned there IOCs or indicators of compromise, and TTPs or tactics, techniques, and procedures of the attackers, which equal the attribution. It's the actual success of them in their attack, in plain terms. Dealing with a lot of these things, the bad guys are really good. They are really good. And most of us who are not actively defending, our household cyber defense, because we have jobs that we have to do other things for, they're out there and they're going to be going after you. So all of these things are out there. So from a business perspective, all your business owners and leaders, you have to understand if your cyber, your threat team is not doing a bunch of these things to address this, hire somebody, contract to someone, another entity to do that, because this is ongoing. It's just a matter of time before you will have that event happen. If it hasn't already happened in my early days, in my endpoint forensics days of 15 years ago, we used to say, if it hasn't happened that you're aware of, it might be going on right now that you're not aware of. So the typical cyber crime gangs, and I will get to some of the other information as well. They're run pretty much like companies, as I said. They will organize small teams. They'll do some quick hits where they can raise some money internally. They'll hire staff. They have literally they go out and recruit. They have, I'm not sure that they have HR departments, but they do have somebody managing the money. They have someone who's going to be doing help desk. And if they are a provider to other people on the dark web, they might have a help desk to help you because the exploit that you bought didn't quite act like it was supposed to. So can you tell me how to fix that problem? Yes, there is that out there. There's a whole ecosystem in the world around supporting cyber threat because it's very lucrative, and we'll talk about some of those numbers as well. So, you see all the information there. It's almost scary. I said to Wiley earlier, I said sometimes I wind up talking and it's a horror story. It's a horror show, a horror movie, because I have to tell you the cold facts of what we're dealing with out in the cyber world that surrounds us completely, that we've evolved to. And we always want to continue to move that innovation with technology, but don't ever forget about security. Don't ever forget about it. I'll leave you with an analogy for home builders. So typically with technology, and I think on the first day there was a panel about having a boundary around how you would secure things, where you want to limit. Do you want to put product out before you've actually done all of your due diligence with securing it, or do you want to just get it out there and have the market tell you how to correct things or pull things back? From our perspective, I would say you probably want to get a lot of that done up front. So as you build a house, typically anybody who's built a house, frankly, just rental, even an apartment, you have door locks. You have a basic door lock on the knob, and they might give you a bolt. But if you live in certain areas, typically you'll do a lot of aftermarket things, like you'll have a chain. You might put these Ring cameras and things on your house. You might have all these other things. They're not built into the house. You're putting that on after the fact because of what you know about the environment around you allows you to say, okay, they've only given me the bare bones because that's not really part of their business, and they really want you to have a good experience. And from a software development perspective, and those people who are in that, They want the user to have a good experience because they want you to come back. Having said that, you have all of those exploits that come out, and because of those things that have not been taken care of up front, it is now a vulnerability that's now spanning millions globally. So as I finish out on the gangs here, if they get to be really good at what they do, they will wind up having political connections, much like legitimate companies do in most countries. So they'll have some political connections, and in certain countries, that means they're going to get a little certain cachet to do things on contract work on behalf of those countries. I'll touch on a couple of those countries, but it's as I said, it is run like a regular business, legitimate business. There's one. So they are a major cyber power. Obviously, I think that's pretty well known. We don't really get into the details about why, but it is part of their growth plan. You know, as China would like to be a major political power by all means. We all have had experiences where you have maybe some counterfeit things, things that you buy, you have concerns of whether it's been hijacked or stolen by a Chinese entity, and now you have a fraudulent device or whatever, you know, with iPhones, and because they have great hackers. I'll just use that. Some of their threat teams are very good about stealing intellectual property and then providing it to the government. The government says, well, you know, we didn't do this. It just fell on our lap, so what would you like us to do about it? We just throw it away. We fill it into the system, and it helps to grow the economy. So it is as I said, it's part of their plans. You know, China has made no secret about them wanting to be the great power of all time. We have a 500-year plan. They've broken it down even to 5-year plans as well. Their court system, their court system has had, as you see, they do prosecute some people here and there. I don't know whether it's performance art or not. I really can't speak to that in large, but it is. They actually we have verified, and me working with the U.S. government, we've been able to verify that they have facilities that they provide for some of these contractors, that they own the buildings, but they're all contractors. They're essentially 1099s. So whenever they put desks and internet access, and then they just go after whomever, and whatever they fish and catch, the government takes, and government is always of the plausible deniability. Well, they don't work for us. They only, well, yeah, they're in our building. We do provide internet, but they don't work for us. So, and as we were talking about earlier, they have a lot of really good people, who are really very creative, and this is the other side of innovation. They are, in order to crack a lot of these things, and we are, and I'll touch back into why software and things like that need to be better going out, or better protected before going out. As soon as there's a vulnerability in any update that you might get from Microsoft, or I hate to pick on anybody specifically, but to some extent, all of us have some level of Microsoft tools or whatever. As soon as there's a vulnerability, that ecosystem has already pronounced it and provided some way to exploit it, and it's ubiquitous across the world. So they're going to go out and they're coming after you with that. So it's something that it is something you always, as an individual, much less your companies, to pay attention to all those updates. Actually, one thing I want to go back to, if this is the right button, let's go back. Yes. So I mentioned on here, they had a recent exploit that my company was actually named in, where we had a multinational, multi-corporation operation that we took down, a major healthcare-related and also small office, home office attack, and I think the next slide will touch on that. But they're going after these gaming entities who really don't have a lot of security in them at all. So, any of you have children or any of you are gamers, those are like wide open places to be attacked. I'm not a gamer. My children aren't gamers, but I'm sure everybody knows somebody who's a gamer. They use that as a nice fundraiser because it's easy. And then they go after, specifically this one exploit, they went after the U.S. healthcare system with the money that they raised from all the gaming attacks. So the small office, home office routers that I talked about, and this is another one I wanted to touch on that this all probably affects all of us personally, because we all have, if you have internet at home, you've got a router. Well, these little small home office routers. And if you're a small company, you have that same type of router. My company was part of this. So if you have some of these end-of-life routers, and specifically they went after Cisco and Netgear routers that were end-of-life and were announced that they were no longer being supported. You know, maybe, in the case of like my mother, who's a retired engineer, but in the analog world is not really tied into the current world, was not really keeping on top of when a router is out of life, end of life, and not even paying attention to that email that they got that says you need to replace this router because it's vulnerable. So China had some of their attackers go after those routers globally. We were able to take down part of that multinational, multi-corporation operation that we were part of, was able to take down some of those actors. But the threat is still out there. And the crumbs of how to be successful are still out there. So it is still a threat. So if you haven't already done so, or if you're not somebody who's already on top of that, make sure your router is up to date. Unfortunately, they're not cheap to replace them. If your provider doesn't provide them for you within your plan, it's something you have to look at as well. Yes. What? Good question. So most of the providers do have some level, cursory level of security at their level. So as the data that they're handling and passing through, they do have some of that security. The challenge is it doesn't really matter, if that makes sense. And then to answer your question, whether it's outside the firewall, inside the firewall, answer is yes. But yeah, and again, if that's not what you do, that's a challenge, which is up to you about keeping up with hygiene. So it's very complex, and yet it's very simple. Yes, we need security, but that still doesn't necessarily mean you're not going to still receive phishing emails. Still not going to mean you're not going to receive all these other things that have bypassed all the other systems, because, again, they're really good. They are using the same things they're using in their personal lives, so they know how this all works. So, it's man in the middle to a certain extent, which is another cyber that actually doesn't count for everything. Okay. Dr. Lisa and Terry, all right. Okay. All right. But anyway, so this group is still out there. Well, the group we took down, I think it was 40 individuals that we were able to arrest. Yes. But the threat is still there. Threat is still there. So North Korea. I mean, I could have used another country in the same region, but that was too easy. North Korea is also cyber power. This is another one who's on it's more of a fundraising effort. They've been pretty much going after. I also use this because there's a lot of crypto talk here this weekend. So these guys are involved in that pretty heavily. That's a great way for them to raise money. for some of their things, and they like ransomware. I hadn't talked about ransomware yet either. So ransomware, filthy, dirty way to take somebody down is when you click on that that email or that attachment to that email, and I'm not going to speak for everybody, but I will say there are times when you're not quite on your game and you see something that looks like it's something else that you're normally seeing, and you just kind of click it, and halfway through the motion of you clicking that attachment, you go, no, I shouldn't have done that. And there you have potentially a ransomware thing where they just basically lock down. Everybody understand what ransomware is? Yeah, ransomware. So, okay, I don't have to explain that. Yeah. So there are certain scenarios, and I know the FBI here in the U.S. has procedures where they want you to do and not to do things. As a company owner, I would advise you to at least engage them. It's not necessarily doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be a successful scenario or not, but at least to be able to get into the process and make sure allow the police to take care of this and deal with it. We have seen where the ransomware attacks have basically destroyed companies where they call the attackers bluff, and all of their intellectual property went up in smoke. So, yes. Absolutely. Yes.
So I'm not sure if you're familiar with the ransomware attack that happened with FinTrack in Canada.
No.
This is the financial services reporting agency that handles all the money service licenses in Canada. About in March, they were attacked, and the system went it's not official, but it was a ransomware attack. And basically, everything is down. You cannot register. They just took all the systems down. And I think they called it a bluff. Because you can't register for your license and you can't report. So who enjoys those type of things? Russian hackers, Chinese hackers. Because all of a sudden now, the money launderers can do what they want within the financial sector. And there's no reporting.
Yeah.
Government
Oh, absolutely. Remember, that's the environment that I live in. So I've been dealing with governments for 25 years. Yeah, they are the major targets everywhere because they have access to the whole country of information. So, but as I put up that other slide earlier, the other industries don't think that you're immune to attack. So, but yes, I had a little thing at the bottom. You remember that movie a few years ago? I forgot what his name. What was the guy's name? Actor, but it was the interview, and they were making fun of Kim Jong-un, Joe Rogan, and what was his name? Yes. Have you seen James Franco lately? I don't think I have either. Yeah. So they didn't like that, so they went after Sony. And Sony's got a pretty robust cybersecurity team. Doesn't matter. Sometimes it's. I think one of the earlier slides I listed it. I didn't mention it. The challenge we often have, even when you have a really strong defensive team, you've got a great portfolio of tools that you're working with in that team. The issue often is, and anybody understands the OSI model. We kind of make up we made up the thing called layer 8. It's between the person, or I should say between the keyboard and the chair is the problem. It's people. People make mistakes. People, even if it's not malicious, say, as I said, somebody might click on something, or someone might have the same password as everything else on their device, or their home address, or whatever, or something that they, that's the biggest problem. Why it's going to also continue, because it's people. We all have people. So you kind of touched on it, Ty, briefly, about what's the common denominator in a lot of this. It's financial. So monetary loss projections. This is what we saw from last year. That's trillion. If you don't have to count all the zeros, it's $1 trillion. And frankly, I think the 10.5 is low because we don't have 24 is not done yet. So, but those are the projections. Even with those projections, it's ridiculous. That's how much money is lost, and you can see all the different derived per hour, second, all of that stuff. It's in and of itself is a massive economy of money. So what do we do about that? I mean, I mentioned all the things. These are the things of why you want to have some of those threat intelligence capabilities. I don't want to make this about a personal commercial, so I'm not going to do. If you want to have a conversation about that offline, we'll do that. But these scams they're getting better and better. And the other big topic this weekend, AI, generative AI, those weird emails and text messages you used to get that you could say, oh, look at the weird E on that word or why they misspelled that. That's going to help those phishing emails be a lot better. The syntax is not going to be off as much. They're not going to misspell things as much. So, that's one of the things why I'm always like with generative AI and those things. I'm like, I know it was great. It was created for the right reasons, but like a lot of things, the bad guys got on it really early, and they're using it for bad. But yeah, somebody. Okay, I thought somebody asked something. So, I'm not even going to go into this stuff, but I'm sorry? Oh, no, all right. I don't have my glasses on, so I can't read that. Okay. So I have 1 minute. Anybody have any questions, any thoughts? Yeah. Why? Mm-hmm. Yes. It's just like, just like with AI itself, it's still preliminary. I mean, it's from our perspective personally, it's not necessarily something we do. We're more on the IP side, so address to address, some of that visibility of the conversations that your IP devices are having outside your network. So it's a little bit higher level than that. It's not really into the content within those digital streams, but we can sidebar that. Okay. Some of our analysts are working on that, as I was saying. Yeah, this is something that's ongoing. We actually have a policy where we're not using it at all in company. The marketing team, if they want to use certain things, it's offline on their own personal devices. So it's something that we have basically said because, we can talk about my company and who we are and what we have access to, because it would hurt all of us if some of that got out. So, all right. Thank you. Oh, I didn't put up the slide. I had my contact, but if you need contact, see me outside.